Okay, so here's an example of what I tried to do with these piston skirts. You know that these piston skirts are usually rectangular in shape and have a 90-degree angle there. But these piston skirts need to be clearanced for this 74 millimeter crank, and I'll show you why. An option is just cutting these skirts clean off and having no worries at all, but I just don't like the idea of that because the piston skirt has a role to play in, you know, locating the piston in the center of the cylinder, and among other, and that's where we're at now. So there's an example of another one that I've clearanced, and you can tell what the skirt is hitting, especially if you don't have them clearanced at all, is, you know, the counterweight on this crankshaft. So I'm gonna do the best I can with one hand to show you what happens there. All right, so there's some movement, and there it is. I was able to move it a little bit closer, so you can see that contact is basically made still. And so I'm not gonna dilly-dally around on the next cut. I am gonna take a significant portion from there to there-ish and go ahead and just guarantee, because that is at its closest point, guarantee I won't have to do it again. And there's the new cut. You can see the skirt, it's a little bit more of a triangular cut now, and that's a guarantee that it's going to clear that crank counterweight on the crank. So still got to polish it up a little bit with the Dremel. That's the rough cut, but that's the shape I'm going to go with. I used a shorter rod, well, a 5.325 inch rod. And the reason I did that was to get a more natural deck height. I've never been a fan of a ton of shimming underneath the cylinder base. So the stroker plus a longer rod will make the piston stick out of the top of the head or of the cylinder, and then you have to do a ton of shimming to get your deck height right. My math is showing probably just a 20 thousandths shim will do fine and put me at around somewhere between 50 and 60 thousandths of deck height. So that's the choice I made. You can do the same build with a longer rod, and you'll have to do less clearancing here, but you'll probably end up doing a lot more shimming underneath your cylinder. So, and while I got this piston out, I should go ahead and mention something I learned. The beautiful thing about this piston is its hyper-eutectic capabilities. I'm just kidding. I didn't even know what hyper-eutectic meant before this. So apparently it just means that this piston has above average silicon inside of it, which means that it will expand less after being exposed to the heat. Man, I don't know. I wanted 88s, and that's how they came. So hyper-eutectic it is. We'll give it a go. And another question you might have about these are, well, if you've been building a stroker, why aren't you using a stroker piston with the wrist pin moved to allow for that and less skirt clearance issue, etc.? They're not available. The B stroker piston is not available. So if you want to build an 1800 and you're not going to open up your case and you have to use these thick-walled 88s like I'm using, then you are going to have to clearance the skirts on your pistons a little bit, simply because the stroker pistons aren't available for this build. Well, for sure, after experiencing a trauma like that, I need to make sure I got these back in pretty close weight of each other. So now I've polished the rough cuts down on all of them. And basically want to guarantee that still got same weights on them. 416. 416, and that it took some fine tuning, but I think it's worth it. 416. 416. Okay, I'll bring you in and show you the new cut now. This number 3 cylinder is at its bottom dead center, and there's the counterweight that was going to be striking the piston skirt, and you can see now that there is definitely adequate clearance there. There's no way that skirt is ever going to hit that counterweight. It probably didn't need to be shaved that much, but I have the satisfaction of knowing that's not going to be a problem. Okay, we're going to use double thrust bearings on this cam. So both sides will have a thrust surface. That's this collar here. Now, the problem with that is there's a tang on one side, and there's a space in your case to accommodate that tang. But on the other half of your case, there is not. So one of these tangs, you can either notch the case, or you can just buzz this tang off of one of them, which is what I'm going to do. So I'll be using this Dremel and just buzz that tang off of there. I'll show you how I'm going to do it real quick. And there's a shot of it after it's been knocked down. So that's where the tang was, and you can see on this front bearing closest to the cam gear there is no groove for that. The grooves you see here are of course the oil holes, but then as we move down the cam, you know, the other bearings have accommodations for those tangs, so it's really not an issue as you move back. But on this first one, I just wanted you to see how it looks, and it just makes sure you have a nice fit when you put that bearing in. So if you noticed in that last shot, underneath that cam were the lifters. I've already, put them in on that side to see how they fit, and these are the ones I got. They came from CB Performance. They look gorgeous, and they fit perfectly into my lifter bores. There they are. So also this cam is a 2241 ground by CB Performance, and basically it seems to split the difference between an Engel 100 and an Engel 110, which I couldn't decide which one I wanted, and then doing my research I found this one that seems to be in between the two of those. So got that from CB, and those are the lifters that came with it. So with all that done, we'll go ahead and take a look at the rotating assembly, and you can see now that that's spinning good, and even when I go the other way, nothing's hitting, and I know that the piston skirts aren't going to hit, so the clearances are looking good. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is this area here. Right now, in the normal rotation, it's good, but in the beginning, when I counter rotated it, this would pop out just a little bit. It wouldn't walk out completely, but it would pop out right there just a little bit. And the reason for that is that this thrust bearing here and here were too tight. These are Silverline cam bearings, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But while I got it there, you can see the end play on this cam. So zoom in right there and watch that movement, the end play there. Can you see it? Before, it was zero end play. I couldn't move this thing forwards and backwards at all, and that was making this cam walk out of here. So I'll show you what the fix for that was. They happened to be a little bit too thick, the flange of it. If you look here where I can catch my thumbnail on that lip, and same on this side, they're a little bit too thick from front to back. So what I did to this one was knock it down on the face like I'm going to do on this one for the other half of the case, and that's something you might have to consider. So there's the end product. You can see my thumbnail. A little bit of that ledge is still there, but it doesn't just catch it like it did before. So that's going to help me out as far as getting my end plate. And what it did was fix this rotation now to where boom, and I can do it the other way and it doesn't walk out. So that's good news that the cam gear fits proper. I've got a little bit of end play forward and backwards, and you know, extending the life of this cam. So that end play from front to back, according to this book, is the one I've been using. That's the axial 1,000 to about 5 thousandths. So I think that's okay. The other one they're talking about here is this backlash. It's pretty minimal, basically nothing, to 2 thousandths. So, you know, that I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but you see where those teeth, the cam gear meets with the timing gear on the crank. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little bit of movement there, right where those teeth meet. And if you listen, you can hear it. And it's minimal, but that's all you want there. And the point is, to all of this, that's another problem that I experienced in this build. The cam was walking out on counter rotation. Thanks to VW Darren, he put out the video that showed the problem with these double thrust bearings. And so I anticipated it, and sure enough, it happened to me. And if it wasn't for help from guys like that, and at Mike F&N, he actually collaborated with me a bit before this build through the comments on my channel. And on that note, we'll wrap it up for this video. Got a long way to go, some things to think about, but that's where we're at. So if any of this is helpful to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment for Bombero Bus. And thanks for hanging out with us and following this build, and we will see you on the next one.